And now, with your permission, I want to bring to stage Tim Brown, CISO of SolarWinds, Ruby Aronishvili, the CEO of Cytactic. Let's play!
What do you want us?
I want you just as pretty as you are here on stage.
Okay.
When I told originally my kids that Tim Brown is with us, I said, imagine that you are a soccer fan and you have the chance to play with Messi. When you're a cyber geek, imagine that you have a chance to be with the most celebrated CISO in the world, Tim Brown, so privileged that he's actually on our board of advisors. And Ruby Aronishvili, a dear friend and a leader in the community, the CEO and founder of actually Cytactic. You want to say a few words about yourself, Ruby and Tim, before we get started?
I can start, yeah. So, hi everyone. Thank you very much for having me. Ruby Aronishvili. I was born and raised here in Akko, not here, in Akko, no. At the age of 18, I actually moved here and started my B Science here in Computer Science and Math in Tel Aviv University, and then I've done my Master's here as well. Joined the army after that. I was part of Atuda program based on the TDIM. Joined the cybersecurity unit, was in the founding team of the Israeli Red Team, incident response team, that's section 25, 21, 25, 26. 2012, left the army, founded Cytactic. Cytactic is considered today one of the cybersecurity unicorns here in Israel, still in very high growth trajectory. Enjoying every day, and I was privileged also to be part of Cytactic as one of the investors and enjoying every minute of it. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much, Ruby. Tim.
So Tim Brown, CISO for SolarWinds. I think you've already introduced enough of me.
Let's get started. Let's meet the company. By the way, everything is based on a real incident, but sensitive of the facts, we actually camouflaged it. So the name would not be the name of the company, but it's based on a real incident. Let's get started. Let's introduce actually the company under attack.
Meet Orvion Dynamics AG, a trusted partner in industrial automation, proudly headquartered in Basel, Switzerland, specializing in smart control systems for high reliability sectors like pharmaceuticals, aerospace, and semiconductors. Orvion empowers manufacturers to monitor and manage their operations with precision. As a publicly traded company with 6,000 employees across 4 continents, we deliver seamless firmware updates and real-time visibility through our cloud-based OrvaCore platform. Built on innovation, dependability, and deep sector expertise, Orvion Dynamics, the engine behind the world's most critical production environments.
So let's meet Orvion. And it's important, these facts are important for us. They're a publicly traded company. They're in the smart manufacturing domain. They're actually headquartered in Basel in Switzerland, but they are publicly traded in the US. Their client base includes some of the most sensitive manufacturing companies in the world. Pharmaceutical companies, aerospace, semiconductors. They can't be more sensitive production sites in the world. And what they're offering, and just when we were exposed to the company, we realized what a fascinating industry it is. They do something which is called intelligence automation of manufacturing. They do precision control of distributed manufacturing. So remotely, you can actually monitor the production processes of large factories. Their core platform is called OrviCore platform, which is actually a cloud-based factory monitoring. But one thing which will become important later, they also have a firmware update tool, which enables them to push code. In simple words, they can remotely change actually the software in some of these factories remotely. One thing which is important, they were very concerned with the fact that they might have a ransomware attack. After a wave of ransomware attacks on manufacturing companies, so they decided to install Halcyon. I don't know if you're familiar with the tool, but Halcyon is a kind of like ransomware detection and response tool. But as many companies do, they didn't have the resources or the budget, actually the manpower and the budget, to do it all at once. So they decided, let's start only with 20% and gradually we'll install it on other endpoints, something which will become important later. Another thing that they've done, and here just to understand the importance of it, they actually partnered with Cytactic, a cyber incident response management platform, to get them ready. What does that mean? they first onboarded the organizational profile on the platform. Meaning the platform became aware, what is the organization, what is the industry, what is the kind of like the structure of the company, what regulation is applicable to them, what is the kind of like the governance structure, so the system could calibrate accordingly. The system actually want to calibrate for this company. Second, what they've done, and that's very important, and we have Shai Simkin here. Shai Simkin is the world leader of actually cyber insurance from Howden. He taught us how important it is to pre-designate your panel of experts. So Shai actually told us it's very important pre-crisis that you'll be able to select kind of like who'll be the people around the table. Because as I told you, you'll have technical, intelligence, legal, PR, business continuity. You want to actually make sure ahead of time who will be around the table in each position. So they actually choose these people. Last thing that they've done, which is very important, and I'll show you in a second, they use CI, and Ruby would mention in a second, but they use CI in order to understand what is their threat exposure. Ruby would explain in a second, but what they've done so is that they customize the response plan. They don't want a general response plan, but they want it customized for the threat model. Ruby, could you explain a little bit about what does it mean to understand my threat exposure and customize my plans?
Of course. When coming to analyze an organizational risk profile, the first thing that needs to be done is actually to understand the threat profile. In simple words, what types of attackers are relevant to the organization? What will be their TTPs, techniques, tactics, and procedures that they are going to use in order to get to the business assets? And in simple words, what are they after? Is it data? Are they going to cause any kind of pressure point on the organization for extortion, what we call today ransomware? Is it going to be something for, I don't know, commercial espionage? There are multiple reasons behind, let's say, an offensive act against an organization, and we need to understand that as part of the process. Once we understand the threat profile, we can then cross-reference it with the risk profile, in simple words, where the organization is vulnerable. When you have the threat profile, you know where the organization is vulnerable, and you know where is the intersection between those two. You understand where the attack is going to come from, what's the likelihood for that to happen, and later we'll see also what will be the cost for that.
So important, actually, many organizations prefer just to have like generic plans. What does that mean? That when you come to this organization, you see they have a general incident response plan, general data leak plan, which is of no good. That's not relevant for me. Tim, can you explain a little bit of, and we had a pleasure of doing it with SolarWinds as well, what is the importance of actually customizing your plans, calibrating them to your particular organization?
Yeah, incredibly important, right? So when you look at incident response plans, typically they're paper, right? Typically there's a lot of paper, you define the plan around the paper, and they're insufficient for all the scenarios that are going to occur. Plus, when you look at a good incident response plan, you're customizing it. You're saying, what tools do I have in place? What information do I have in place? Who do I call? What are they going to do? What's somebody else going to do? So you really customize the plan to your environment, to what's most important, to any types of decisions that you need to make. So you try to get the plan as close to reality as possible. So customization, incredibly important. Generic is fine. It's sort of a starting point, but it would never get used in reality.
Cool. So actually what they did, and by the way, on Cytactic platform, since we have expert, Expandian, Signia, Bozellen, they've created the best of breed plans. But now we have the rule of 90-10. 90% you can take actually these out of the box plans. But the 10%, as Tim said, is so important. Customize them. Make sure that they know your tech stack, that they know your people, you know your procedures. You'll see it in action. So basically they created a customized plan. One of their plans is for ransomware. They customize the plan for overcall ransomware. What happens if they have the ransomware? And they customize according to the tech stack they're using. They're using CI, we'll see in a second, as the threat exposure management tool. And they're using Halcyon as the ransomware detection and response tool. Let's get started. What happened to them? September 9th, 8:30 in the morning. Actually, it was 8:32. It was 8:30 in the morning on September 9th, where one of actually the support engineers got access to the firmware update deployment system. Again, to remind you, this tool enables them to push code to the most sensitive factories in the world. He got access to this system and he found this black string, a ransomware note across all their internal systems. And apparently the threat actor is saying the following: I compromise your update pipeline. In other words, I can actually now take advantage of the fact that I control this system and I can push malicious code to your client's endpoint. In simple words, I can take over the machines now in pharmaceutical, aerospace, semiconductors, factories, just by the fact that you are corrupted. It's called software supply chain attack. And he said, if you don't pay me $6 million in 48 hours, I'm actually will exploit it. Tim Brown, you've been in this situation. What one can do? Be short.
Yeah, first thing is to discover whether it's real, right? Because a lot of things end up not being real, right? So you'll get, just what do you have tools in place to be able to determine, how real it is and what the real impact is. Because somebody could just be bluffing.
Cool. But here, Obi, we'll probably say it so many times. What would you advise the client? They have now a black screen on a production system, such a sensitive production system. What one should do?
Something happened.
Yeah.
That's a very good question. The question is really what you have already in place. So when you think about this kind of situation, it's not, let's say, detection already. It's already the response phase, and actually it's very reactive response because something already happened, right? There is nothing proactive in this specific scenario. But at this point, right, we need to start acting, right? And the most important thing to remember is that in the time of an incident, the cost of the incident will go exponentially with time. Meaning every minute that you waste now is going to cost you. That's why what Tim mentioned before, having things prepared already up front that are tailored for you. We'll talk about communication later and so on. Those are things that are extremely important. But at this point, we need to really open or break the glass accounts that we have, take out all the information that we need in order to really go and execute the IR plan, or specifically go to Cytactic.
So now let's
specifically go to Cytactic and start running.
But let's ask a question. Very important. And Tim, I know that in your incidents, that was a challenge, kind of like, who should be informed at this stage? You're the CISO. Who should be informed? And what's the escalation process? The normal escalation process you have. Once that you've realized it might be an imminent threat for the company, who should be on board?
But it's more than that, Nimrod. Who needs to declare incident? Because it's also a very important thing, right? As Tim mentioned, you need to understand it's not a bluff. Once you're convinced, now you need to declare it.
Yeah, and it's on a production system that you said. So something has happened that shouldn't have happened, right? So, you want to, as incident responders, you try not to call wolf too many times, right? You want to make sure you do at least some basic diligence. So your team starts doing basic diligence and records it as an incident, right? You start, it's okay to record something as an incident and then stop and decide, nope, okay, false positive, good. But you declare it as an incident to start with. And if it's real, then it becomes a real one. If not, you pull it back.
That's an idiom I learned from Tim Brown. He called it a blow-upable incident.
And this is clearly a blow-upable incident.
Blow-upable, it might be.
I couldn't come up with a better word, right? But it explains it, right? You've got an incident and it feels like, oh, this is strange. This is weird. This could blow up to something a lot bigger.
So let's see actually what happens when you have a blow-upable incident on Cytactic platform. Once you've realized that it's an incident, we don't know if it will evolve to a big crisis, but it's an incident. The first thing you want to do is actually decide what process would I follow in managing it. Should I actually go with a playbook that I already have and follow the playbook because I've prepared and rehearsed? Or should I ask the platform actually to generate to me on the fly a response plan? Many companies that don't have the plans would actually use the platform in this Swift mode. They just actually tell to the platform, what is my incident, what are the main attributes, and the system, which is a smart generator of response plan, would generate a response plan for them. But if you're ready, actually, you already have a response plan, a playbook. And that's what happened with this company. They already have the customized playbook. They've drafted actually the overcore ransomware playbook. They've done it with with their tech stack. So they know Cy, which we'll see in a second, they've already mapped the threat exposure for them and the quantified risk, but also done it with Halcyon, which is their protection tool. And see what happens when you actually start the playbook. Our platform actually, the way that operates in the response plan, we don't believe that you should operate in silos and different playbooks for different teams. What you have actually on the one platform, everybody is actually on the same panel. So to understand from incident management, IR, IT, legal, comm, they're on the same plan. And not only that you're following the best standards, kind of like you're following here, for example, the NIST standard, that's what a company picked, following the NIST standard in the way that they plan. It goes actually step by step in detailing how you should do it, as we'll see in a second. Another interesting part, by the way, many companies, and here kind of like the CISO, would now declare like an initial meeting. What is the importance of this schedule, of this kind of like scoping meeting, Tim?
Yeah, so you need to be able to get the right people involved. You know, as you could see from those screens, that you have many different groups involved in an incident. And it's important to inform them the right way. It's important that they have tasks that they're going to be performing and that you separate that. So it's not just, oh, the security team's managing this. That doesn't work. It doesn't make sense. So very important to have multiple teams and then bring those teams together to say, here's where we are right now, and then codify that information into a platform.
Perfect. So what we have on our platform is actually this virtual war room. One thing is important. It's out of band, it's secured, and it's enable you to bring all the people on a single actually call with a structure how to run this meeting. Shortage of time will not show this meeting. We'll go back to our plans, but now actually ask the question with the experts that we have here in the room, kind of like, why is that important, Ruby, to understand who is behind the attack? Why does it matter to me to understand what we call the threat actor profile?
That's a very good question. Attribution in general allows us to have some kind of shortcuts, right? As I mentioned before, time of handling the incident will be the most important asset that you are going to protect, right? Every time that you can learn something without waiting for the incident response team or the digital forensic team to go analyze, reverse engineer the malware and so on, and you can actually work with the information much before, that will save a lot of time and will allow you to start containment in a very early process or very early stage in the process if you are convinced that you are being attacked by the same.
Why do I care if it is a scattered spider? Why do I care about the group? Why do I matter? Just as a matter to...
No, I'll tell you. First of all, the first thing that you'll need to gather, and that's easy to gather once you know the name of the group, is IOCs. The IOC list will be immediately populated in the organization, will help you to identify, first of all, what is the infection scope, right? That's a very important question that you'll hear also in the war room that you described before. The C-level executives will ask you, okay, how bad is it, right? The question of how bad is it is a very tough question when you know that you have only one screen that is black screen, or 2 or 5 or 10. Is it 10? Is it 50? Is it 50,000? We need to know. How do you know? You deploy the IOCs in the different security tools that you have in place, whether it's the EDR, whether it's your SIEM environment and so on, and you get response, you understand what is the scope. When you understand the scope, you can then react. Whether it means disconnecting something from something, whether it means that the infection is still ongoing, whether it means that you want to isolate a specific environment and just continue from another environment. It's very important to know on the technical side. It's not really the crisis management of things, it's more the incident management.
But Tim, why is that important not only for the incident management, for the crisis management, to know who is the threat actor, what's the profile?
So different threat actors have different profiles. Some are actually very responsible, is I guess a good word. If you pay them, they will, in general, give you keys that will work, that allow you to recover.
Good reputation.
Yeah, good reputation. Right. Others have a bad reputation. Others have no reputation. So in some ways, if you're attacked by a known actor with a good reputation, it gives you additional options.
I was once in a situation that we were communicating with a threat actor, and the CEO told me, how can I trust them? I said, you know, they have a reputation. He said, how can I trust them? And he made me actually write, it was back on Signal, to write kind of like a note to the threat actor. My CEO wants to know how can I trust you. He was almost insulted. He said, I have a reputation to maintain, and if you want, I can refer you to happy clients.
Yes.
So what you've just heard from Ruby now, and by the way, if you have Ruby, probably you less need of a platform. He's a brilliant guy. But what happens when you have a platform is actually all these advices of how to run an incident are already hard-coded. So what Ruby just told us? He told us, for example, you need to do a key capture verification to understand kind of like, you're trying to find out what are the IOCs, what are the indication of compromise, and look to see if you find them on your backup, meaning that also your backup is corrupted, and how to look for them. Next thing that you want to do, you want to find out whether it's only a single extortion, meaning they only actually kind of like decrypted your data, or whether they also exfiltrated data. Can you say something about it?
Of course, the motivation, that's the second thing of attribution. What is the motivation of the attacker? What the attackers are trying to do? Is it, again, only to extort you? Are they working, for example, with a government agency? Like we've had an incident in Germany where everything was just, it looks like encrypted, but then we understood it's not encrypted, it's wiped, right? So there is no requirement for a ransom. So what is the motivation there? It's very simple, only to distract, to just create damage. And then that's a completely different type of an incident, right? You need to react, the playbook should be different. And that's something that you need to understand, and you can understand that already at the beginning, if you know who is the group that is behind.
So important, because actually the way it operates, quite often companies too much follow the threat actor. They believe, okay, he said that he extort me for decrypting or for malicious code, I'm not examining other things. But actually, if you have the playbook, you know from the very get-go, you try to look whether there's also data exfiltrated, you then install the Halcyon tool, meaning they already equipped the tool. The next thing that I think Ruby mentioned to us is that you need to understand the threat actor. And one thing to do is actually to analyze the ransomware note. Ruby, can you say a word about what is to analyze the ransomware note? What one would do?
Yes, so in the ransomware note, you have, again, a lot of hints. By the way, ransomware notes is one of the maybe the best ways to really do attribution, because based only on the language and some of the parameters there, you can understand whether it's affiliated with some group or another group, because sometimes it's not that easy to understand. But more than that, in the ransom note, you get several important details. First of all, how much you need to pay. Second, where you need to pay that, right? And what kind of communication channel you can have. Think about, for example, someone that you are negotiating with. That's something that can maybe used as some kind of delaying tactic, right? Once you are trying to understand what's the situation, you start to communicate with the attacker. How do you do that? Usually with the ransom note, you get all the relevant information.
So as you can see, by the way, if you don't have Ruby, quite often companies don't know what's the process to analyze the ransomware note. How can I actually take the metadata? How can I analyze? Whether I can check on the darknet? Do I go to the command and control? One thing that is done on a platform is actually detailing the process ahead of time. We call it a BPMN, Business Process Management Notation. You know who should do, what they should do, when they should do it, and actually you have clear instructions. Sometimes in an organization, you may have thousands of different small processes, and you want to make sure that it's not only people who know, but it's connected. Now something about that. We have only one system that already we saw the ransomware note. How can I know the scope, Ruby? How can I know what other systems are affected?
So we talked about IOC deployment, so that's one thing. So you actually deploy it, you see whether you get answers from the different devices out there, and then you know what is infected. More than that, you have to continue monitoring, because infection might be still up and running or still live. There are some malwares that are acting as worms, right, trying to reinfect the environment. And more than that, one of the most aggressive things that you can think about is what we call reinfection. So you think that everything is clean. The malware is hidden somewhere, right? In some kind of, let's say, recovery places, then there are multiple of those in every environment. And then you think that everything is clean up. You switch on again, and then you're encrypted again, right? That's something that is really, really painful.
How much team normally a CISO would know all the map of the business processes to understand from one infected system what other system might be affected?
So CISO usually doesn't know all of the details of everything. So we have to assume that, right? That we have a certain level of exposure to things, but people in the company do, right? So very important to have the tasks assigned to the right people within the group to do the discovery and to give you the information.
Perfect. So let's explain to us, Ubi, what does that mean? That actually we're using Hyver in order to map the attack route and what systems are connected.
That's extremely important, the context, right? This is one word that actually says everything, right? When something is, let's say, compromised, and you see that there are connections to other, whether systems, identities, assets, applications, even partners, then you know at least what is the potential of explosion, let's say, how far it can get, right? Based on that, you're actually, in a way, limiting your scope. Instead of trying to evaluate everything, you know specifically what is connected, and then you're going and validating one by one. That's something that is actually changing significantly the effort that you need in order really to go and evaluate or analyze everything in the organization. The hardest thing to do, or the hardest thing in an incident, is what we call the disinformation. The fact that you don't have the full picture, and it's always the case. You always know partial things about, let's say, parts of the incident, right? And that's something that is really the hardest thing, and you need to try and complete the picture as fast as possible with all the data that you have out there. This kind of map that we've seen there, that helps you a lot to actually create those connections.
Perfect. So, and another thing, by the way, that the company had, since they're using Halcyon, as you'll see in a second, Halcyon also have what we call response capabilities, the ability to immune the systems, so they're actually deploying that. The nice thing about it, as you see, that the system actually details to you what one should do. But it's not just about taking action. You're in a live incident. You do have upcoming alerts coming from forensic, intelligence, others. And as you can see, when you're a live crisis management system, you want to have one actually command and control that get all of these alerts. So they get actually, if you've seen earlier that we want to see who is the threat actor, they get into what we call the crisis repository, meaning the one file repository that connects all the files about incidents. They got now the threat intel report from Halcyon. I'll go over the report very briefly because that's important, but Halcyon actually, this threat intel company, see what they tell them. They tell them the threat actor is Scattered Spider. For those of you who don't know Scattered Spider, I'm happy for you. For the rest of the world, that was the most dominant attack group actually in 2025. They were actually very active, very little for many companies. What's interesting about them is not only the access vectors that says that they are commonly compromising third-party contractors in order to get access, it's also about their notable behavior, that they're fast in lateral movement, meaning it's very fast between the time they enter the organization to exploitation. And another thing, they tend to bluff. What do you do with this team when you get this intel report? What one can do with this intel report? What importance it has for you?
So it gives you a lot of information, right? So tools, techniques, procedures they're utilizing helps you scope some of the incident. The fact that they like to bluff is a very interesting component that says, okay, your likelihood of a bluff is potential, right? If it was never bluffs and always tells the truth and has a 90% success rate, that would be different.
Perfect. So what's happening here, and that's something, it blocked for some reason? Can you see? Oh dear. Perfect. What you can see, and that's I think, and now it's a promotion for Cytactic, the benefit of this, once you have a new report, it's include attributes that you can actually use to understand what is part of the crisis. So what a platform does, every time you have new attributes, the system can in real time import these attributes and create to you in real time, kind of like a map. Currently, there's limited visibility. Management don't really know what's the situation, what's the current status, what's the timeline. Now you have a single map. Can you say a little bit, Tim, about the importance of situational understanding and why is that important and how would you use actually some kind of like a centralized command and control map?
Yeah, one of the things that we called out earlier is that there's many groups involved, right? And in a real incident, you end up with external parties, you end up with internal parties, you end up with just all of the groups, and you need a method to communicate where you are, You need a method to communicate what the status is at a high level. Even though I may not be dealing with the deployment of the Halcyon agent, I can look at something and say, oh, okay, we know information. We're getting information from other places. So having a consolidated area with enough information to be able to make decisions on for each one of those groups is just critical to make you as efficient as possible.
And what does that mean that we quantify that, Ruby? What does it mean that the company connected this incident to their quantification engine?
That changes everything in the way that you think about cybersecurity incident, right? Because now everything you can measure the investment that you are going to make to what is the potential impact. Now, the point is that you'll see, or we'll see later, that also decisions, they have impact on the cost, right? And that's something that you can measure in a very, let's say, continuous way, and today also in a very accurate way. So the point is that once you know what is the cost per element, per component, you're able to try and minimize that as part of your response plan. For example, if you know that reputation is a big issue in your organization, deal with communication, even before containment. By the way, that's, in general, that's a very good advice, right? Communication. You see in our models, communication alone, only communication, in case of cybersecurity related incident, can be worth more than 14%, 14% of the overall cost of cybersecurity incident. And that goes to millions by just saying the right thing, the right time, and that's something that can be prepared up front. You don't need to wait for it, right? That's, again, the potential savings that you have in an incident, that's a lot. But in order to do that, you need to understand.
Your permission, we'll need to speed up a little bit.
No.
Now the question, Tim. Would you engage with a threat actor? Anyone with dinner plans?
Yes. There you go.
Tim,
Yes.
That's okay.
Tim, now the question. At the beginning, the threat actor actually said, you have 48 hours, $6 million pay. How do you take a decision whether to engage with the threat actor? Who should be around the room? What considerations should be entertained in taking this decision?
So in most cases, it's a good idea to engage with a threat actor simply because it can give you more indicators of who the threat actor is, whether how real they are, other things like that. And it's also enabled to, if you started your communication, if you need to negotiate, you could negotiate. But you're just saying initially, should I reach out? And I think in most cases, the answer is yes.
So here, just to show you, we've seen again and again in incidents, and we have here some very experienced, actually, crisis managers in the room, that the problem is sometimes management is paralyzed in taking a decision. It's the first time they'll take such a decision. Should we negotiate with a threat actor? They've never talked with a hacker. Should we engage with the press? Should we engage with the authorities? What we've created is actually decision support tools. We've took data from thousands of former incidents that says how to take an informed decision. So for example, the decision whether to negotiate with a threat actor, and we don't have enough time to cover it, but there are considerations here. We map the consideration and the weight for each consideration. For example, the territory the threat actor is coming from would allow whether it's legal to negotiate. What's the impact of this incident that I have? How much information am I missing? Do I have a professional negotiator? Can I get actual information from the threat actor? Do I need to delay time? For the first time, instead of...
So that's much better than my guess of yes.
Go with Tim Brown. He's much smarter than any other system. But here, lacking of Tim Brown, we have a system that we've built that for the first time actually come with an informed decision.
Yeah.
It provides you a recommendation, but not only that, it provides you the reasoning that you can then take, and actually it helps you in retrospect, even if you took the wrong decision.
I was serious about the guess, right? A guess is not good, right? A guess is an ill-informed, non-factual, emotional response to the question as opposed to something that's...
Since we're short in time, one first what happened here. 25 hours after it started, one of the clients of Ovrion actually came to them and says, hey, we seem to have a problem. Someone is claiming that they compromised your system, and now that our factory is at risk. And they're one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the world. And actually they're saying, hey, we want to understand what's going on here. What one should do here, and here the question, Ruby, for you as a crisis manager, how would you consider whether actually to inform proactively your clients, the regulators? What would be consideration? Someone apparently, the threat actor is an active player, and he's actually approaching your clients. What one can do?
So that's a very good point in general, right? One thing that we always recommend our customers when we start an incident, is evaluate everything that you need from communication perspective. What that means, all the notification obligations that you have for you declared an incident. You have customers that you need, for example, to declare within 24 hours that you are in an incident, right? Usually you'll see most organizations, they don't have this data available. They need to go and analyze contract by contract, try to find this information, right? The beautiful part of this kind of platform is that you don't need to remember. It will tell you, hey, now you need to communicate with the regulator, you need to communicate with the insurance company, you need to negotiate or you need to communicate with these customers, and maybe the most important thing, you need to go and say this, right?
Perfect.
So being able to say what and to who, that's key in communication.
So let's show it very fast because it's not. I used to be a professor here, an adjunct professor at the law school. I still love teaching law, but it's not a legal class. I just show you that actually what Ruby just spoke about is a legal disclosure. Mm-hmm. That's for the legal team. They need to assess the incident materiality and the regulatory obligations. And by the way, quite often, just as you had a technical process, it's a process. If your lawyers and team are not trained, what is the process to do disclosure? They need to know kind of like what's the process, what I need to look to. I would be very brief here, just to show you that when you're using actually the platform, as Ruby said, you don't need to say, okay, what's the process for me to evaluate materiality, for example? The system has a tool pre-built how to assess actually the severity of the incidents. And when you need to actually make a disclosure, and assuming that everybody understands here that will be determined as a material incident, going to what Ruby just said, we call it the disclosure hub. Pre-mapping kind of like what's your disclosure requirements, meaning what regulatory standards are applicable to you, and each one of them that you already have it pre-mapped. And if you need to generate a disclosure, you actually want to have a smart tool, and our smart AI team is here, and actually that we've created based on the company templates can help you generate in real time your disclosure. So as an organization, you don't need anymore to guess. The system will help you to generate the compliant, the applicable disclosure at this given stage. But what one can expect when you're doing a public disclosure? What is likely to happen now when you made a public disclosure about an incident? And remember what sensitive clients we have. That's what's happening.
I must understand what is going on. Does this breach our SLA?
We saw the message claiming firmware compromise. Are we affected?
Have you informed regulators?
So as we understand,
No, that's easy.
Tim, when Tim brought us this incident, there were 18,000 affected customers. Can you tell us a little bit about what is the kind of communication or the pressure you get from clients when you have a real incident and you might affect them?
Our customers were definitely not that calm. But it is correct. They will call, they'll ask questions, they want to know information. So, you know, you can publish things for them, you can publish FAQs, they still want to talk to people. So you have to expect communications is critical during this stage, critical that you're not underestimating things and you're accurate in the information that you share. And it's okay if you don't necessarily know something, it's okay to say you don't know.
What about the fact that in many organizations, since you had 18,000 organizations, so they wanted to talk to many people, what about the consistency of the messages?
Yeah.
Can you tell us something about how important it is that all messages are consistent that you do?
Yeah, extremely. So, you know, we did FAQs for everybody that was on the phones. We enlisted the entire company. Our queue of questions was about 12,000 of calls into our queues. So we had documented answers to things that people needed to stay within so that we could be consistent.
So see, actually most companies, I saw chaos. Everybody want to be a hero. One want to deal with the customers. The other says, okay, I'll take the regulators. Another one saying, okay, I'll speak to the press. That's a chaos in the making. We've realized one thing which is important. I think Ruby started with that. You need to have one place where all your statements for different constituencies are accurate, updated, and consistent. So we've created what we call the messaging hub. For every point of time, you have the consistent messaging. Everyone who communicates externally should use this messaging. But not only that, if you need now to generate messaging, one thing that is common, companies are panicked. They're customized to kind of like generate messaging like, we have a new release of a product, we want an award. They're not accustomed to how to actually What are the bad news? We're under a cyber incident. What is happening? Many of them tried to hide, tell too much, too little, not being transparent. What we have in these systems is actually based on the experience of hundreds of crisis communication experts. What are the questions you are likely to be asked and how to answer them? We call it the leading questions. But now assuming that you need to generate actually a statement, you better actually use our proprietary actually messaging tool. It was trained by messaging strategies, sentiment, the company narrative, and the facts about a crisis to create the right messaging. See what's happened in our crisis as we're trying to bring it to an end. There's a forensic update. Actually, the forensic team came 48 hours. It took them 48 hours to come back and say, just as we were indicated in the threat intel, apparently it was a third-party contractor account that was compromised. There was a field integrator in Ukraine that connected a lot of their factories, and apparently he didn't have MFA configured. What does it mean? With a username and password, you could get access to semiconductors, airplanes, pharmaceutical companies. Can you say something about MFA and the importance of this team, and how come that companies are still having failures in the basic hygiene of identity?
Yeah, so it's easy to say you want MFA everywhere. It's hard, right? So if you have contractors worldwide and those types of things, and you're not managing their devices per se, because they're contractors and you still have to give them access to things, for example. You know, what we had to do was, we enforced MFA for everybody, enforced YubiKey for everyone, but we had to go back to VDI for contractors or Azure DevBox. Those were our choices to be able to have MFA everywhere. And we do now, but that's why it's hard.
So as you can see now, once you've realized actually that the problem was that MFA was not enforced, one thing that you want is actually the system to be able to tell you how to enforce MFA across all the system. We call it technical mitigation. Is it easy to enforce MFA across all systems, Ruby?
Of course not.
It's easy to say yes.
Yeah.
But to keep the business running, no.
I mean, there are things that are, you talked about OT environments in general, right?
Yeah.
The legacy system, there are in some places you'll find Windows 95 there. Go and try and implement multi-factor authentication in Windows 95 and good luck with that, right? So there are places in which it's not even practical. So you need to be prepared for that, and you need some kind of other solution like ZTNA and so on. There are solutions in the market. It's not easy. If it was easy, it
so what you see here, the way that the system operates, once you identify the TTP, for those of you who are not familiar, the MITRE protocol actually said TTP. And the TTP is an indicator that tells you, okay, what is the cause and how do I need to fix it? So actually you have a process, but as I said, it's a quite complex process that is pre-mapped. So the company actually, and by the way, interesting enough, how do they decide which systems to go and actually patch MFA? Can you say something about it, Ruby?
Yeah, of course. So when, as we discussed before, when you know how the cost is going to be broken down, you can start from the most risky environment and go down the path until you go to the least risky environment. And the risk-based approach, actual risk-based approach that is actually touching money in the end, that's something that helps you very easily to identify the most cost-effective places to go to.
See what happened with our incident. 49 hours after it started, by the way, we have a reliable threat actor. 48 hours, he gave us time. 49 hours, he came back and says, hey, I see your organization is going nowhere. Stop stalling. We have also exfiltrated contracts, support logs, internal emails. $3 million now, or everything goes public. What does it mean, Team Brown, that now we have a double extortion? What does that mean?
So I think, at that point you have to again, investigate and determine if it's real, see what you can see from logs, see if you can see any indicators of what they're saying is true.
What is the likely, and maybe here again, lucky enough for the company that they partnered with CI, what does that mean, the new quantification that we see now?
So you can see that, for example, for things like customer information, the cost now moved from 2 million to 5 million because we know that we have an indicator at the moment for data exfiltration. Now, the point is that once you know that something happened, you're able really to put a dollar value around it and likelihood around it, right? You'll see that that is still something that needs to be validated, of course, as Tim just mentioned, right? And by the way, he mentioned before also that you want to communicate with the attacker. So that's also a good time to ask the attacker, hey, show me an example. right?
Show me the data.
You said that you have the data. Show me an example, right? That will be also a way to understand what's going on.
Maybe just a question, how simple is it to scope an exfiltration, to know how much data has leaked and kind of like what's the sensitivity?
I would say impossible, but I mean to be very accurate, right? It's very, very hard. It is more doable to understand volumes
Right.
of
Singles.
data and statistical data. Easy. The actual data, impossible.
So we have to understand, off record, this company has data of pharmaceutical companies, semiconductors, aerospace, the most sensitive data in the world, production data that can lead to faults. And they actually want to know what data leaked, and it's almost impossible unless you're prepared. Interesting enough, and we just show you, once you understand that your incident is not only actually ransomware, it's also a data leak, what one should do then? And by the way, Tim, if you were to follow a ransomware playbook, would it provide you any answer once you understand it's a double extortion?
No. So you need, this is where dynamic comes into play. And that's what many incidents end up being, is they change. So being additive allows you to have additional playbooks.
That's the problem. I've been to situation companies had ransomware. They were going after the ransomware playbook. But only as the incident unfolded, they understand also data exfiltrated, data integrity is affected. Sometimes it's a different playbook, sometimes even a conflicting playbook. Actions you would take if you want to go live again are very different if you shouldn't go live because data integrity is affected. Mm-hmm. And companies, when they use static playbooks, just follow the same playbook. What's happened on a Cytactic platform or dynamic platforms is once I've realized is actually this incident is a double extortion, I change the parameters. At the core of our platform is a smart actually data taxonomy that translates the crisis into attributes and in real time change your response plan. So if now I have a data leak, I actually have now response controls which correlate with analyzing data leak. Here, for example, understanding and mitigate data exfiltration channel, exactly as Ruby said, you may pre-map kind of like how would you identify this? Let's bring it to an end. There's an investigation update. Lucky enough for this company, good news finally. It was almost 50 hours after it started, but they've realized, first of all, they're using, as you saw in the response control, the DX3, kind of like the data exfiltration tool, to try to understand whether data indeed exfiltrated. As Ruby and Tim told you, there's no real way for you to know whether data exfiltrated unless you're prepared. Lucky enough for this company, they have this data exfiltration analysis, and they were able to go by the actual file. If you're not ready with that, no way you'll do that, but they were able actually at the actual file to say, they were able to call the hacker on the bluff. No, the hacker was bluffing. He didn't have the contracts or the logs that he was telling because actually he encrypted the data. Oh, never mind. Can we go there? He encrypted the data. Oh, we can bring it to the close. He encrypted the data, but he didn't actually, never mind. He encrypted the data, but he did not
Exfiltrated.
he did not exfiltrate the records. As for business continuity, what is your main concern, Tim, when you have actually a ransomware incident about continuing business as usual?
Yeah, it's really how long it's going to take to get back.
Yeah, and the main problem, I know that one system is actually attacked. I don't know the scope. Can I keep operating my systems when I don't know that? Lucky enough for them that they deployed what we call the Halcyon response tool, meaning that they actually have a tool to tell them exactly which systems are corrupted. And for all other systems, they were following Ruby's advice. They were, after identifying the IOCs, were monitoring live and saying, hey, this system is actually not compromised. So in the midst of a ransomware attack, they could continue operating. Most companies that have been in ransomware incidents actually stop operation, given the fact that they cannot validate what's the scope. And last but not least, given the fact that they have the ability to understand that only few systems are corrupted, but to validate the backup, they could actually keep running. And here, they checked with CI. So what is the new quantification outside?
Cost change significantly, of course, right? And reputational damage will be harmed slightly, right? There is nothing around this, right? And then, of course, business continuity as we are managing the process is also a slight issue. But those, I mean, the comparison of 3 million in general compared to the 20-something million that was anticipated at the beginning, that's completely different.
Tim, how do you quantify during an incident? How do you make such informed decisions? What's the impact now? Which also would inform the last decision that the company should do. Do they still have a reason to pay ransomware?
No.
Here in the room, on the one hand, I have few systems who are compromised. It would take me 4 to 6 days to go live, but I already could actually rule out exfiltration and rule out actually business continuity impact. I only have few systems I go back. Who here would pay the ransomware? Who would refuse to pay the ransomware? When we just started the incident, how many of you might have said, he's asking for $6 million? Let's just wire the money and make sure that we're alive. Here, lucky enough, by the way, one thing to say, when you're doing tabletop exercise, sometimes you want to give the options so people can see kind of like these revolving doors. Here, by the way, most companies have the option either to pay or not. Most companies refuse to pay. What happens in this particular company? Good news. There was a Wall Street Journal story about them. Again, a little bit tweaked. It wasn't Wall Street Journal. It was Kol Hakrayot. Just laughing. It was kind of like another journal, but actually saying that everyone recovered from ransomware attack without paying the hacker. And sometimes this is a story that is actually very supportive of the company, saying actually they responded well. They prepared, they had a plan, they had a tech stack, they performed well, they were transparent, and it's actually praising them. Tim Brown, after your incident 5 years later, can you say that your response changed for positive or negative the public reputation of SolarWinds?
It changed to negative for a little while, no question, right? Nobody said anything nice about me for about 4 months. But after that, we used the incident to have a positive. We overshared, we were transparent, we're an example of how you manage incidents. We used it to help the world in many ways. So we switched something really bad to something good.
Very good. I know that we don't have time to show that, but just to show in a second, one thing that we commonly do when we train companies is to see another example in real life and see how companies performed vis-a-vis how would you perform if you prepared. So this is, I'll be very brief.
Over a couple of days ago now, Travelex was hit by this huge cyber attack, and the hackers have actually contacted Travelex and said to them that if they don't pay £4.5 million, then they will be released.
I'll go very brief. It's the same incident that happened to the largest foreign exchange company in the world in 2019. December 31st, they were hit by double extortion, but the threat actor actually asking $6 million. But for them, unlike the incident that you saw now, it took them 7 days with no public disclosure. Imagine that you are the largest foreign exchange provider for the world, for the banking system and fintechs, and 7 days you keep silent. Foreign transfer cannot operate, but you keep silent. It took them 8 days until they went publicly and says, actually, we're under attack, and the banks were surprised. What took you so long? It took them 2 weeks to negotiate the ransomware payment. They thought a good success would be to pay down the ransomware. They were successful. They paid $2.3 million instead of $6 million, but they didn't trust actually the extorter. So it took them 2 more weeks until they felt comfortable to go back live. It's a month. They were a foreign exchange company, the largest in the world. After a month, most of the banking institutions and the clients actually left them. 9 months later, they filed for bankruptcy. What we're trying to show, and that's probably the message to be left with, there's a good way and a bad way to prepare for an incident and to manage an incident. And honestly, it's not about how sophisticated the threat actor is or how actually complex the attack is. It's about how ready you are with your threat exposure analysis, with your risk analysis, with your playbooks, with your team, and how well you'll manage it. How fast you'll have the team starting to manage the incident. How effective they will be according to the plans. How will you be able to adapt as the crisis unfolds? How would you take decisions? And how actually you'll be tuned to the damage. If that's the case, you can change the outcome. Thank you so much, and thank you, Ruby Aronshvili, CEO of CIRM, and Tim Brown for coming. for playing with me today.